Amy, you can go first. It's your
Okay.
meeting.
All right, so this is the May 25th regular meeting of the Planning, Zoning, and Housing Committee, and we have a quorum. Calling to order at 7:39.
This is Jack Davis, Chair of F&B. I call this special meeting of the Finance and Budget Committee together at 7:39 as well.
All right, and I know, Mark, I think you guys are not necessarily participating with us at the very beginning, so I'll go ahead and start.
Should we call to order? Or should we hold off, Amy?
Up to you. If you want to, you can.
Yeah, this is Mark Adeletta with the Public Works Committee, the RTM, with 8 of 14 present, constituting a quorum. I call this meeting to order at, I guess it's still 7:39.
Perfect. All right, so obviously this is a joint meeting of all three of these committees. Mainly it's a joint meeting because of the Great Island leases, which is the second item on our agenda. So I just want to handle sort of the first item, hopefully quickly. You'll all recall when we discussed the budget with Jeremy, he circulated a memo explaining why he wanted to raise the fees for planning and zoning and all the land use fees, architectural review board, environmental protection, etc. The text of his memo was correct, but the chart that he used that listed out all the fees, the chart he started with was wrong. So the chart that was approved by the RTM is wrong. It didn't go up as high as he intended it to. In fact, there were a couple of places where the fees went down from what had been last approved in 2019. So the new memo that you should have all received, there was the last page, it was just planning and zoning and EPC fees. There's a list where he's got things in italics and crossouts and bolds. Basically, the crossout, let me make sure I get this right. The crossout was the old fee. Italics is what we approved in March. Bold is what should have been approved. So we're now asking that we approve the bolded fees on that chart.
Mhm.
And basically it's to accomplish what we'd intended to accomplish in March. Hopefully I didn't confuse that more than it needed to be. Does everyone understand what's being asked of us?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion, or does someone want to make a motion to approve for planning, zoning, and housing?
I'll make a motion.
Okay. And we've got a second from Erica.
Mhm.
All in favor from planning, zoning, and housing?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Nope. Okay.
Okay,
That passed unanimously.
I need a motion from F&B. Can somebody make that motion? I see Jenny, I see Louisa as the second. Based upon the fact that I proved in the last meeting that I can't subtract, I'm not going to make any comment on any potential error made on any of these things. So are we ready to vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any no's? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Great explanation.
All right. Good. So that was the quick thing.
Yeah.
So the next thing that we're discussing is the leases on Great Island. There, as everyone knows, there are a number of buildings on the property, both single family homes. There's a stable, there's some apartments above the stables. And all of these, not all, but most of these houses, including the stable, have been leased out by the Steinkraus family in the past. And all of those tenants are actually still in residence. They just are there without a lease, with the exception of one property. So basically, there are a total of 7 leases on the property. One residential lease, 18 Great Island, was extended prior to the closing of the purchase. We've discussed with town council, and town council has informed us, because we took the property with that lease in place, we don't have an ability to approve or disapprove of that lease. And then we just got recently 49 Great Island. So all of the leases, so leaving aside 18, which was extended already. Now we're talking about six leases. 5 are residential. All of the leases were approved by the Board of Selectmen, except for 49 Great Island, which they're planning to approve on Monday. That one, for some reason, I didn't realize there was somebody there. None of the leases have been approved by the tenants. They do match what they had before, but they haven't been approved. We've been told that if there are any material changes to the leases proposed by the tenants or changes to the tenants, the revised leases will have to come back before us again. Planning Zoning Commission discussed a mandatory referral. They started on May 9th and again, May 23rd. The mandatory referral was approved by a vote of 4-1. However, there were some errors in their report, and that's going to have to be approved by them again next Tuesday. But all of this is expected to be completed before our next RTM meeting. At the meeting, we're going to be asked to vote on each lease separately. The 6 residential leases, so now I'm including the one that's the extension, are all 1-year leases, which begin on June 15th. We've got 24 Great Island, rent of $4,800, 40 Great Island, rent of $7,500, 46A Great Island, which is one of the stable apartments, rent of $5,500, 46B Great Island, the other stable apartment, rent of $2,000, 49 Great Island, rent of $5,500, and 18 Great Island, rent of $9,000. Those are all monthly rents.
Amy, I just want to make one slight modification.
Yes.
The extension for 18 Great Island actually runs from April, is the only one that has a different date. It does run from April 1st, 2023 through end of March 2020.
31st.
You know, you're absolutely right. I forgot to update my my talking points when I got that. So
Yeah,
thank
no,
you.
no problem. Sorry.
So the total monthly rent from all the residential apartments is $3,300 or $411,600 annually. The commercial stable lease has 2 different rates. It has a rate of $1,800 during what I would describe as the summer months when
18,000.
18,000. Sorry, thank you. Boy, see, this is why Jack should be doing this part.
It was a
18,000
rounding error.
during the summer months when they expect to have all of the barn full, and then 15,000 during the winter, so October 15th to April 15th. That works out to a total for the stable lease of $198,000 annually. The stable lease gives the tenant the right to use the stalls, the paddocks, the indoor riding ring, and the outdoor riding ring. The stable lease also gives the tenant the right to use the bridle trails on the property up until October 15th, 2023. So they really have access to basically the entire property. All of the leases, residential and the commercial stable lease, include a 90-day termination provision that can be exercised by either the town or the tenant. So, and I'm sorry that I'm just sort of blathering on. I'm definitely going to open this up to questions, but I just want to kind of get some background on in front of us. So, like I said, all the tenants are there. And this really goes a little bit more towards the commercial lease. June 14th, 2022, the Darien Planning and Zoning Department issued a cease and desist letter to the owner of the property and the barn operator, stating that the operation of a commercial show barn in a residential zone is not in compliance with the town's zoning regulations. The commercial show stable has continued to operate in this property in violation of the cease and desist. So now that the town owns the property and they're still there and they're still in violation of the cease and desist, the town has applied for a special permit that if they receive the special permit would allow the commercial barn to operate on the site for 2 years. That's the request that they've put in. The lease that is being given to us is dependent upon the special permit being issued. The Planning and Zoning Commission is expected to open the public hearing on the special permit on June 13th. So there's not any possibility that the special permit will be in place by June 15th, which is the purported start date of the barn lease. I have some pretty strong opinions on these leases, so I'm just going to go ahead and give you all my opinions, and then I'm going to open it up to everyone else. We obviously this is a significant amount of money that would be coming in and would help us to cover the operating costs. We don't know what those operating costs are right now. We haven't been given that information. We are hoping to have that information before the RTM meeting and hopefully before the next Finance and Budget Committee meeting. Because this is a residential zone, I personally don't have any problem with these residential leases and continuing them. I have no basis to know if the rates that are being charged are appropriate, but that's, what they've been paying. I do have a problem with the stable lease. I have concerns about this town setting precedent by approving a lease for a use that's not permitted on the property in the face of a cease and desist, which was issued by the Planning and Zoning Department. I have concerns about what that means for other properties in town. If the town's not complying with its own regulations, if it's allowing this activity to continue, how, are we going to expect other people to comply with cease and desist letters? I also, I have concerns about, the discussion has been trying to get this property open to the public as quickly as possible. That was what we had asked of the Great Island Committee. And, there are a number of reasons why that may not happen right away, but the stable has access, to the entire property to use with the horses. Even just to get from the barn to the outdoor riding rink, they have to cross over the only road in and out of the property. And I don't think that we can really say that the property is safe for the public to be walking around when there's this equestrian activity occurring all over the property. So that's really where I'm coming from on all of this. Like I said, I would like to feel that I could approve all of these leases. I'm pleased that now we have actually the extra residential lease, that 49 Great Island lease, since there's a decent amount of money coming in just from the residential leases. But at this point, I'd like to hear from others and get your thoughts.
Amy, this is Peter Fanos. May I jump in?
Please.
Yeah. So it sounds like you believe we may have an equal protection issue if we're agreeing to if we're trying to resolve a lease with a lease issue with a special permit with one property, but not treating the similarly situated stable property in the same way. Am I correct?
No, the special permit that's being applied for by the town is to allow this stable to continue.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for resolving my.
It is specifically for this commercial
right.
show barn.
Right. So, okay. I mean, I in concept, I agree with you. If we're trying to move in the direction of slowly and surely, or whatever pace we're choosing to take full right of possession to the property, that's going to be an obstacle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Put this way, do we have what's the plan if we don't want to renew this lease? What type of conditions the existing lease are there for us to be able to have them leave the property?
There is no existing lease.
None whatsoever?
None.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I just want to,
So
I've got a lot of people with raised hands. So I'm going to let a few other people. Werner, I think you raised your hand next.
Fine.
Thank you, Amy. I have two clarification questions.
Mm-hmm.
One, regarding the residential leases.
Yes.
I understood that those are exactly, the new leases are exactly the same in terms of content and in terms of amounts than they currently are.
That is my understanding. There aren't, however, some of these leases have expired. Most of these leases have expired already, so they don't have a lease in place, but that is what I'm told. And
the second question is regarding the horse stables. did you say that the lease for the horse stable is contingent on the town receiving that exemption or not?
It is,
It is contingent.
correct.
Amy, can I just add something in? When all the terms are consistent, with the exception of the 18 Great Island Road, which had the extension, because there is the addendums that they accept responsibility that there's arsenic and other potential pollutants on the property, which was not in their other leases.
Yeah,
So I just want to point that out.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question.
Yeah.
If any work that needs to be done on Great Islands is part of the lease, at least I'm talking residential leases at the moment, is included in the residential leases, because there could be trucks, there could be, workers. And I haven't read through all of the leases in detail, but I wanted to make sure that the town has access to whatever it needs to do over the next year without compromising anything that is part of the leases.
They do. The leases are really just limited to the houses themselves. Priscilla, you had a hand up?
Had planning and zoning ever given the stables a cease and desist before? If they're not allowed to have a commercial property, why did this just all of a sudden happen?
Well, so the history of the stable use is that it was a private barn. Bill Steinkraus was an Olympic show jumper. His wife was a rider. It was a private barn. I don't know at what point a commercial barn first moved in there. I do know that the stable that's there right now was very visible. They at one point put signs up on Goodwise River Road right in front of the pillars there. And so I assume that gave everyone notice that they were there. There was there were a few letters sent to them before the cease and desist was issued as well.
We discovered it during due diligence is another way to.
Because it's been commercial for quite a while.
But without the appropriate paperwork, I understand, Amy, correct?
Correct. There's never been a special permit issued for a commercial show barn.
Yeah.
Mark, you had your hand up?
I did, Amy. Thank you. With regard to the termination provisions in the residential leases and the one for the barn,
Yep.
am I correct in understand that all of them have a termination right? I think 90 days, and it's a bilateral right with regard to the residential properties, and I think it's unilateral on the part of landlord, or I guess the town as landlord in the case of the barn. And would that allow if the town to terminate in the event the special permit was not granted?
Well, so let me answer two things. First of all, I'm not sure. I thought they were all bilateral, but I would have to go back and look. I'm not going to, if you've read that differently, then I'm not going to dispute that. There is no lease in place now. So there's nothing to, there's no lease to terminate if the special permit isn't granted.
The lease doesn't.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't take effect unless the special permit is granted. Understood. So with regard, but once it is in place, the town can terminate any of these leases under the termination provisions with 90-day proper notice.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Jenny?
Hi. The issue I have is with the timing. How much leeway, how much time does the town have to get the special permit? Because they've been operating, the tenant's been operating without a special permit ever, right?
Right.
So if the town is going to apply, is it going to be out there for 3 months, 1 month, 10 months? I mean, there's no date in the lease agreement. So until the town gets the special permit, but what if they don't get it for a while? So is this there's no lease, no agreement, and just there's no contract, right?
There's no contract. Yeah. Presumably they just continue to operate as they have been because, like I said, they're there now. The special permit, the town has applied. Planning and zoning is going to open on June 13th. There will be objection. There are neighbors that have filed objections already. that always slows down the process with planning and zoning. Obviously, they have incentive to move it along quickly, but they also don't meet in August. So, we'll see how quickly that happens.
And to be clear, just so I understand, so there's been no mandatory referral yet, right?
There has.
Oh, there has.
Yes.
The mandatory
okay.
referral passed 4-1.
Right.
They've discussed it on May 9th and May 23rd. The mandatory referral specifically said that the stables were not going to be using the property beyond the stables, so they have to go back and redo their report. And that, I'm told, will happen next week.
Okay. And is this the cart before the horse? We approve leases before special permits are in place. Does that happen a lot in planning and zoning?
Well, it's not usual for the town to be entering into the lease. It is not unusual.
The town needs to be treated like everybody else. So like,
Agreed.
right. So does planning and zoning typically allow Darien residents to lease out, their garage apartments?
Well, again,
without
it's whether the activity is allowed to operate, right? So you can enter in there. It isn't uncommon for commercial leases to be entered into that are subject to zoning approval, but you don't open and start operating until you get the zoning approval.
Right.
The difference we have here, where it's the cart before the horse, and to use probably a bad phrase for the context, the cart before the horse here is that it has been operating all along.
Right.
I think Erica had her hand up.
Can the planning and zoning revoke the cease and desist? I mean, I don't know if they would even want to, but I understand what you're saying. If you're concerned, at least my interpretation of what you said was that it could set precedents if they're having cease and desist and then are like having these approvals, could they revoke the cease and desist? Or what do you feel would be the see as a possible solution to those things? Like
the only way to
not then what?
If the only way to deal with the cease and desist is for them to get permission to operate on the property. So they don't. So that's why they're going through the special permit process.
Right, but you had expressed concern. Did I understand that if they had a cease and desist and they approved it, that would set a bad precedent?
Correct. Well, so the precedent.
So then what? Like, what's this? Like, I don't know.
Well, the precedent is set because they're there already. If we approved a lease for something that shouldn't be occurring, it's just it's worse because there's a cease and desist. And like I said, there's a process when zoning where you issue cease and desist letters for activity that shouldn't be occurring.
Right.
And my fear is asking other people to comply with cease and desist.
I agree with you. So what's the solution to that? That's what I'm asking.
I don't know.
Amy, this is Peter again. If I may, are we concerned about having full use of the property by the stable operation for 2 years? And how that would impinge upon the town's other use of the property? Is that conflict something you raised before? Because the unasked question here, and I may be completely off base, but do we have the right to simply have them close the stables down and terminate the operation?
Yeah.
If that's what we want. If we want the property to be ours for our full use and quiet use and enjoyment, as the term goes, have we looked into the decision that maybe we should just say no to the special permit and ask them within a reasonable period of time to be agreed upon in the future to stop operations and move off the property?
Well, I think so. I think the royal we is the problem in your question. The board of selectmen is actively trying to get this approved. They have approved the lease. We, as the RTM, have the final vote on whether the lease is approved. Let's see, I've got Mark and Werner both with hands up.
Just if I finish the thought, I'm really concerned about approving something that's going to limit use of this property, which we have now closed on for 2 full years. I have a real problem with that.
Can I just give an answer to you, Peter, from without?
Yep.
And I will promise you that P and Z is my least knowledgeable thing of what goes on in this town. That being said, in an article that I read today, the fact of the matter is whether or not that type of operation and whether or not it's consistent with the town plan is not being addressed now. It's being addressed during the special permit. So your questions that you're raising are very good questions, but I think that'll be discussed at P&Z during the special permit application discussions. That's how I interpreted what the result of that meeting was. Is that
Jack, I agree, but yeah, I understand that. I just think we have to make sure we're not voting on anything until that decision is made.
Mark, do you want to go and then we'll go to Warner?
Yeah, we have a question from the floor here, Amy.
Yeah, Amy, it's Patrick Kane, District 1 with Public Works. My question is, has the stable been paying, even though they don't have a lease, have they been paying for at least the period that we have been, that as far back as we can see, have they been paying rent?
Yeah, I mean, I assume they were paying rent to the Steinkrauses, and to my knowledge, rent is being collected from all of these properties, even though there aren't leases in place.
Okay, so de facto, that in effect, that's a contract with them. So because they are recognizing that there is a relationship between the two. So, okay, all right. So they are paying, and they're paying this amount that is in this lease?
I don't know. I don't have any knowledge of what they were paying the Steinkrauses.
Well, how did we come up with this number then?
I'm assuming that was that somebody else was, whoever wrote the lease was told that was what they were paying.
Who wrote the lease?
I recall this from that number from when visiting Great Islands, when we all had the chance to inspect it. So I believe it's the exact same number on what they have paid in the past.
Okay.
But we don't know. Okay, thank you.
Werner, did you have, Werner had a question, and then we'll go to Barry.
I had two more clarification questions. So the way you understand the lease is done for the horses, it consists out of two pieces. One is basically housing the horses, which is the stable. And the second piece is basically using the surroundings, including the ring, correct?
I'm not sure I understand. What was the question? Yes, those are the two pieces of it.
Those are the two. And the permit itself is the permit for housing the stables and housing the horses in the stables, or is the permit only for using the surrounding area, or does it cover both?
So the issue is, I think we need to be, maybe I was a little unclear about why would they need a permit of sorts. They need a permit because it's a commercial barn. Like I said, horses were housed on the property and horses used the property before, but they were Mr. Steinkraus's own animals. Private residential homes, if you had enough space, you're allowed to have horses. You can also get a special permit as a club, golf clubs, Oxridge. Those are, but that's a special, they have special permits in order to operate in residential zones. I don't want to opine as with my legal hat on, but I have questions about whether or not this special permit is even approvable, but that's a different thing.
So then I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
Since obviously the permit has to do with the commercialization of the stable, is there any possibility, because I heard your concern, what I heard your major concern, aside of obviously setting a precedence around the permit and not having a permit, but I heard your second concern was the horses basically using the premises around the stable. So my question is, could we separate this and saying, and I'm speaking here right out of monetary reasons, that we're saying if the reason is that we're concerns about public safety around the property, given the property around the horse stables, could we then separate and say, well, I mean, assuming they get a permit, that allows them to commercialize and house the horses in the stable, that we say for that one, we could vote for, but we would vote against basically using the surrounding properties. Could we split that up or not?
We can't amend these leases. This is a straight up or down vote. Either the RTM approves the lease or they don't approve the lease. And like I said, these leases haven't even, to my knowledge, been fully vetted by the tenants. I'm sure that there have been discussions have started, but there may be changes that come from them as well.
So we couldn't even take a motion around this and say, well,
No,
if
I'm
they-
going to
they
stop
would-
you
if they
right
would be
there.
willing to
No,
amend it, no. Okay.
You can
No.
go to the Board of Selectmen and ask them to change the
Of course,
lease, but
yeah.
that's not something we can do as an RTM.
Yeah.
Barry, you had your hand up before? You're muted.
that-
It sounds like we're acting like we're the Great Island Management Committee. My understanding is the Board of Selectmen would like us to approve these leases. They've evaluated it and they're asking us to approve them. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
But there were certain contingencies that the Board of Selectmen needed. They needed the mandatory referral from P and Z before they did it. Any lease of town property requires the RTM to vote up and down. It's not just on managing Great Island. We do it for leasing towers. We do it for rental of property for the BMW and other places around town. That's part of our responsibility and part of the checks and balances associated with the RTM. I was waiting to step in at one time, and Amy, if you let me just step in before Mark to give a little concept on the financials. There used to be an old joke that they would ask 8 accountants how much was 2 + 2, and 7 said 4, and the other one said, how much do you want it to be? So you're going to end up, and that's the one that got hired. But I looked at these leases and what the value was slightly different, because I'm only interested in fiscal year 24, because this is supposed to be a self-contained fund. And it started with $400,200. Now, when I did the terms of the leases, which are 11.5 months, 4 months, and 10 months for the stable, and only 9 months for 18 Great Island because of when it expires, we end up in the neighborhood of a little over 530,000, which is 130,000 greater than what we originally put in on June 22nd, when the RTM approved the special fund. That usually also says that was the cap of the expenses. So I still think that the cap of the expenses at this point in time is 400,000, because that's what was originally done. We didn't do an increase at this last budget area, and I have a couple of questions into Kate to resolve that. But if we're talking that the cap of the expenditures, and working with Kate over the years, if Kate's coming and saying this is a self-contained fund, they've done some high-level analysis to figure out what they anticipate they were going to spend and what the rentals were. And maybe they expected some not to come in that did. In any event, I wouldn't worry right now that the increase of the lease or the loss of the lease on the stable brings this down to $370,000, because I only have $162,000 for fiscal year 24. So we're still within that range. We're close, but that's why we want to see, both Amy and I, and have requested to see what the anticipated estimated expenses are, to understand what the range is and whether or not we're going and having to require town funds to supplement if we don't have these leases. So that's part of the things that F&B will be looking at and reporting on. So don't worry so much about the money. This is very close to what the original estimate of monies that they thought they would need would be.
Thanks, Jack. This is Mark Adeletta with Public Works. As Jack mentioned, we've looked, or the committee has looked over the years at multiple leases on behalf of the town or on behalf of the RTM, including the cell tower lease and others. And so through that lens, a couple of comments I'll make regarding this lease that we'll be discussing here in our committee, among other things. It's already been touched on. All of these leases have a 1-year term. Admittedly, some of them start at a slightly different start date. The leases clarify what the tenant's responsible for covering as it relates to maintenance, the scope of the maintenance, and in particular in the one for the barns, it goes so far as to discuss in I won't say detail, maintenance of the stalls is being identified. With regard to termination and the obligations of the lessee upon termination, it clarifies, formalizes under both the residential and the barn leases, the obligations of the lessee to return it in good order, broom swept, et cetera, sort of standard provisions as I read them anyway. With regard to repairs, it makes clear that basic repairs for damage caused by the tenant is the obligation of the tenant. And also also talks about which utilities are covered by the respective tenants and which are not. And what else? Oh, and it makes pretty clear the requirements as it relates to the type of property casualty and liability insurance that must be covered. I'll defer to F&B as to the level, but it definitely had the provisions we look for historically as far as having those types of insurances in place. And then we've already touched on the early termination right at 90 days across all of them. So those are some of the components that we've looked for historically and are in these, I guess it's 6 leases we're looking at this evening.
Thanks for that. Anyone else who hasn't had a chance to comment that has any questions or thoughts? Jenny?
I just, I don't have any problem with, well, I have a little concern over the fact that we have a large piece of public land that's going to be used for private purposes. With the existing leases for the single family homes and with the commercial barn that, to my knowledge, does not offer public service, public riding or public access. But I understand we are trying to get the cart behind the horse by catching up the fact that these leases, the payments are coming in. We're getting paid, the town's getting paid, and now we need to have a lease and a special permit and a mandatory referral in place to, I guess, legitimize those. So as far as the short-term leases for the housing, I didn't have any comments really on the guts of the lease. It makes sense to me that the tenants have not read these yet because there's provisions in the stable lease that I would be very surprised if those stayed in. Just from being able to operate a horse stable, you can't limit, you can't say you can't turn the horses out unless the ground is dry.
I saw that too.
It's never, you're gonna get kids bucked off if you do that, but whatever. So there's a few things of that nature. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and maybe it's not relevant yet, and this will come up in the special permit process. There's no language around special events that the current tenant may or may not have. And I do know that it was in the paper that they had a fundraiser that they were advertising. So that's another thing to consider. And I don't know, my biggest issue really is the fact that we don't have a special permit all ready to go. We're a little backwards. Yeah. So
the special permit that the town has filed on behalf of, to allow this activity to continue is very specific that it is for this commercial show barn. It does not include events. That's not something that can get added later. Once the special permit's been noticed, they're limited to what is in the request.
Okay.
Anyone else who has some comments? Yes.
Question,
Beth?
Jenny, when you say there was a fundraiser, was there a fundraiser for the commercial property, for the commercial tenant?
Yeah, there was the stable owner has a therapeutic equine therapy program.
Oh.
They were they had an event, and I don't know how big it was, but I know it was in the paper, and I know it was marketed.
And so people were then driving onto the property.
Correct.
Right.
That was about 2 days before the closing, if I recall the dates.
Right. So if that's I mean, there is there's a whole wealth of information out there on how municipal there are RFPs and there's existing leases for municipally owned equestrian properties and all the requirements that municipalities require of their vendors or their concessionaires. And so we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's good information out there that we can dig up, but it's not in this lease.
Right. And it's also it's not what this business is.
Right, but this is a private business on public land.
Yeah.
So, it's and that's for the future committee to decide and the future team to decide what's going to go there. But for this personal lease, you've got public access is one thing, safety, but that's for them to figure out. But for me, I'm getting hung up on the is this really duly authorized without the special permit in place? So
I'm going to add to something, and Jenny's being very kind, but Jenny does have documents associated with what other municipalities have done in their RFPs with municipal areas. And with all due respect to everyone associated with this, when you read that RFP, there's a lot of things that would be in an RFP for most other municipalities that are not included in this lease, including some environmental issues and some other things associated. So just so that everybody, we're not going to vote today because we are a special meeting, and the 6th lease we couldn't have voted on anyhow, and we still have the statutes that we have to vote on. So we'll be voting on next Wednesday virtually. But I'm in favor of having the lease and all the other ones. However, I will be voting no as a symbolic principle that, I taught project management, and somehow this whole acquisition is lacking an overall project management plan. There are no tests, there are no Gantt charts, there are no critical path lines. And I think had they done that, we would have had a special permit done long before this or understood how these leases operate. There's a lot of other things that we would have been aware of. And so my symbolic vote no is not because I'm against the lease, but I'm against having an outstanding cease and desist and asking myself on principle to vote for something that has a cease and desist on it and you haven't resolved it yet. So it puts me in a rock and a hard place. Yeah, I like the lease. I would have liked all the other things that I've become aware of from the RFPs that Jenny passed to me. But I will be voting no, if nothing else. I'm not asking anybody to join me in my no vote.
Thanks for that, Jack. Amy, we've got a question from the floor here at Public Works.
Yes, hello. This is Rolf Oben speaking. Amy, this is I would presume a planning and zoning related question. Doesn't the town have to file some sort of a land use application for the Great Island? And how would, if that is the case, how would that tie in with the stables?
Well, the special permit is a land use application. So the town has filed, an application to allow the stables to continue. As far as what use is made of the property on a going forward basis, it's my understanding that's, we need to get the Great Island Advisory Committee up and running. And yes, anything that's planned for the property will have to go before planning and zoning. But right now, the only thing that is pending is a special permit to allow the barn to continue.
So if I understand you correctly, the only application the town has filed at this point that has any relationship to a land use is the stables. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so at this point, we don't really have a land use that is more comprehensive for the use of the island in the interest of the town's purchases. Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't think there's been decisions made on what the town wants, how the town wants to use the property. So I don't know that they could file anything.
Yeah, okay, I get it.
Werner?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what the consequences would be of either voting this down.
That was my question. Thank you.
Exactly, or voting for it. Reason being, and what my understanding is if we approve it, basically the town allows somebody to commercialize public property in exchange for the lease. And the town has the rights to basically revoke this lease within 90 days. And yes, it is dependent or contingent on the town receiving the respective permit. On the other hand, if we vote this down, I assume that the current tenant will have to close their business and move. And then the question is, what we don't know is, as you said, Amy, we don't know what the future plans of the town are to do with the property, right? I mean, they could as well say, hey, we want a riding stable. We want to open it to the public. It's not going to be, just commercialized. And all these questions have never been answered by the town. And the town, in my viewpoint, by the way, should never be a tenant. And Great Island, in my viewpoint, should have been completely independently managed, aside of the town budget and aside of the education budget, because we will be having lots of discussions with where does our tax money go to providing whatever, somebody with the opportunity to run and commercialize a horse stable versus, I don't know, money being put against roads. But I guess if we vote this down, that means for the town, rien ne va plus. And the current business has to be closed down, and they have to move the horses out and close their business. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, well, they would probably find another place to rent. They would move to, but yes, they would have to leave the property. And let's be clear. I don't know that this particular stable has been operating at this location for, I'm going to say 1.5 years, maybe 2 years tops.
So can I ask a question to Jenny? Because Jenny obviously understands that type of business better than I assume anybody else.
I think Amy's pretty good too.
So should the town? This is a hypothetical question, right? In their long-term plan, say actually, there is a stable there. There's the opportunities for horseback riding. We want to turn this into something that's accessible for the public, and it's going to be safe and so on and so forth. Is it difficult to find somebody else to operate that? Or is it once these guys are out, we have cast the dice for the next 10 years?
Werner, I really want to not try to get into that conversation, because that is something that the Building Advisory Committee is going to have to vet, and the town's it's going to take a while. I can tell you that there are probably 200 or so municipally owned equestrian properties in public parks throughout the country. And if you want me to send you what I have, you can kind of deduce yourself how other people do it. But I don't want to spend too much time on that, because it's really about, are we going to approve the leases? I don't want to not answer you, but
if we didn't approve, could they revise it? Because it sounds like there's disparity between what you've looked at, Jenny, and the way that it's written here. If we didn't approve it, could they go back and revise it to be something that might be better? And so is that the end of it?
No, I think the next, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but the next step would be, because the tenant hasn't looked at this, and there's no special permit in place, and I think there's probably there's probably an opportunity for the town and the tenant to kind of get to maybe with some feedback, maybe a better lease agreement.
Well, that's what I'm.
This is
That's
going to
what
be a
I'm
framework.
hoping.
What we're approving is sort of like a general lease agreement. They're going to work out the nuances. And there's, I don't know that, we can't make any changes to this. So this is kind of up or down.
I have a question. I mean, hasn't all this whole conversation that we've had, hasn't the Board of Selectmen been through this for hours at some point in the past several weeks?
They've done everything in executive session.
And that's not to say that they have the same expertise that is resident with Amy and Jenny, specific to how you operate a stable, which is different than just leasing to a normal commercial operation. And that's the nuance.
I mean, it feels to me like if they've debated this for hours in executive session, then we should have someone from the Board of Selectmen here. They should explain how they've dealt with, I'm sure they've dealt with all of these complexities we just spent an hour talking about. And they've evidently come to the conclusion that despite all the uncertainties, the best thing is to let it ride and we'll sort it out in whatever period of time, 6 months, 12 months. I'm assuming that's
a fair point, Charles. That's fair.
I know Jack has shown his hand on how he intends to vote. I am in favor of equestrian related something there. I think the barn is really special. I used to ride there and I have a long history in that industry, but I would probably abstain more so on the fact that it has to do with the fact that the process is a little bit not what I would like to have seen. I think we should have seen the special permit before, and I don't know how long the special permit, if we approve this is an open-ended lease. The special permit may never get there, or if I'm assuming it will, but I don't know how long it will take to get that. This could go on for months. And I just feel I would have preferred, I would bless this, even though I may not, completely align with everything in the lease agreement as it stands. If this came in order, mandatory referral, special permits in place, here's the lease with, they get the authority to amend certain things. As long as they're not material, then yeah, it's a different thing for me. But I think
if the lease gets signed and they continue running their business without the permit, right? The town is doing something improper. So my understanding is that they will have to close down their business. That's my understanding.
I don't know what the
contingent. If it's contingent on the permits, they cannot operate. They cannot operate. They can have a lease. They can pay for the lease, but they cannot operate their business until the permit has been issued. This is why I was asking, is it contingent on the permit? So my understanding is that even if we sign the lease, they are not allowed to operate their business unless they have a permit.
Well, I mean,
that's a really important point.
Planning and zoning has been pretty generous.
Know if I want to, before I feel like I can in good faith cast a vote here, I need to know the answer to that. Like, that's a good point.
But the towns, I guess that's my point, is that the towns, the authority of the planning and zoning department to stop a business from running illegally is issuing a cease and desist. The Board of Selectmen has to vote to enforce to put the teeth behind the cease and desist, and they haven't, and there's no indication that they will.
So hence, I think Amy has a really good point, right? This is what I'm trying to understand. If Amy says, listen, the town is trying to buy themselves some time, right? The Board of Selectmen has not set a particular date. They're not going to force the tenant to stop their business until the permit is issued. The town is basically allowing somebody on private property to run a for-profit business at the absence of a permit. And that is just completely incorrect. A town cannot act like that.
Can I say something? Can I say something? My hand is up for 15 minutes, guys. Okay.
Yes, Bert, please.
I'm astounded that I haven't spoken up earlier, but I was very patient. So I waited until you guys call on me. You haven't. So I just want to tell you that I understand that we don't know yet what exactly happens to Great Island. So what is in front of us is a temporary solution to the tenants that are right now on the island. I have taken the tour. I have met some of the people. They're very nice. They have lived there for a long time. I was actually surprised that all the leases expire in a year and that maybe there's an out for a 90-day clause that if we decide earlier, we can do whatever we want on the island. In the meantime, if we make a decision now on the leases when we don't have a decision on the island, we lock ourselves into a situation where we forgo the cash flow and we put the cart before the horse. I think we should give the administration the leeway to renew these leases with the options that I included, and with the view that this is only temporary. Everyone knows that, even the tenants. And at the end of the day, when there's a plan for Great Island, we're going to fit every one of the tenants in there, or none of the tenants, but we have a plan. Right now, we don't have a plan. And if we don't have a plan for Great Islands, we certainly don't have a plan for the tenants. And so we should go ahead and approve these leases with all the flexibility that they provide. And then we're set to continue to plan what we're doing with Great Island.
I would agree with that.
Thank
Time
you, Bert. That was helpful.
it takes time. You can't rush these things. This is a generational thing. I think the administration is very diligent about the process, having a committee and different people looking at it. This has not been rushed at all, this whole thing. I never thought it was rushed. It's a big amount of money. It's a big island. It's a big project for this town. Let them do what they need to do. Give them the flexibility. That's my opinion.
Bert, I just want to, wait, can I just add something to Bert?
Very differently. The town is a landlord of public property and allows a commercial business to be run without a permit.
So I just want to say to Bert, from my perspective, I have no problem with any of the 6 leases, including the one that was extended for the tenants. The one that I have question on, and I would also like to have the stable lease there. So I'm not against the stable lease. I'm just against the same part that Werner's raising. But for the other tenants that are there, I fully agree with you that those should be passed without any question. And with 1 year, we should have an idea of what's going on.
And I think it is important for us all to, I just want to circle back. We will, and the RTM will be asked to vote on every single one of these leases individually.
Right.
Everybody
So
who
it's
wants
not
to
an all or nothing.
run a business in town has to have a permit.
Correct.
But not the commercial business who leases property from the town. That's very bad.
Jenny?
Could they, so when's the date for the special permit hearing?
The meeting is going to be opened on June 13th.
They could well have this resolved by July. And they're also capable of having a special meeting in August if they feel that it's necessary. So
Are they fill in the blank on that date?
I'm sorry?
There's a fill in the blank on that date of when that special permit, how long they're gonna be able to operate without I think it was.
Yeah, I'm perhaps a little less concerned with that. There was a technical issue why it wasn't added to the prior P and Z meeting. But the P and Z will address it. I have no doubt that the commission will do a good job in evaluating the special permit as it does to the commercial side of it. I have full confidence in them. And so that was my only issue, is that we're still in a cease and desist, and that hasn't been resolved. Otherwise, if it was resolved, I would be voting in favor of the stable this time.
All right. I don't know if there's anyone else who wants to speak, or if it makes sense for us to sort of split back up.
Greg has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Greg.
Yeah, just real quick. I just a quick question. I kind of agree with Bert, like the idea of preserving optionality, if that's what the intent of this lease is for the town, seems like a prudent approach. But a question that I had was, if let's say we do approve the leases, it sounds like Jenny and Amy, based on your expertise, like that the tenant, whoever that is unlikely to approve it without significant changes. Does that mean it's going to come back our way?
Yes, what I've been told is if the tenant makes, but the question is, I don't know what everyone's going to consider significant, but yes, we were told that if there's significant changes, that it would have to come back to the RTM again.
Material. Isn't the
Material. I mean, that's a good way to put it.
Then to me, like I would expect, I don't know what these dates are, but sounds like, I mean, how quickly is that process? It's probably not days. So when would we vote again? Maybe, Warner, maybe your concerns, which I think are relevant, maybe those are resolved by then. I don't know.
Well, let me add something from the RTM. First of all, based upon when every one of these leases expire, we will be seeing this at our next June meeting, because they're only 1-year leases. So within a year, people are going to understand, and I'm not even sure that the stable from my income calculation is even that. So we're going to see it again in a year. I do believe that if there is some discussion on that stable lease, I'm only talking about that one, and they come back, then the lease that was proposed is null and void from what we would have passed. And then any of the changes made, providing their material, and again, as Amy said, nobody's defined what is material, would come back to us, and we could easily have a special meeting virtually for the RTM in either July or August and approve this. So if necessary. So there are options for the RTM. We don't have to, this isn't an all or nothing, or we're waiting till September.
I don't think, Jack, I don't think it's gonna go there, because that would end up with the RTM to be asked to micromanagement, something small as this. I believe the administration, the executive, has negotiated these leases already, I would expect. And they don't want us to make changes, and they don't want to use us for, going back to the tenants and said, yeah, we agreed on this, but now the RTM says that. I don't think that's going on.
Bert, you misinterpreted what I said. First of all, I was giving options for what the RTM can do, not what's going to happen. That's number one. Number two, the point that was raised was, if any of the tenants come back and want to make a material change to the leases that were just presented to them, then that lease, regardless if it's for 24 Great Island Road or for the stable, that lease is then null and void, and a new lease would be discussed if there were material changes made, and the RTM would be responsible for voting on that. If there are no material changes made, then what we vote on carries.
Okay.
So I'm
okay. I agree.
Okay.
But why don't we just vote on the question of the stable in 4 weeks, or whatever the timing is, after they've been through the special hearing and so forth?
We have that option.
That was my question.
I don't think we have the option to say we're not going to vote now, do we?
I think we could table it, even though I'm not proposing it. Please, the administration's already annoyed at me already. So I'm not proposing that we table it, but I believe that we could, providing we move it to a date certain, to which we would then have to respond to that. All right, and have a meeting on that. That's
Well,
just
I think it's
RTM
important for
stuff.
us to know what options we have. So thank you for that.
But we have been asked to vote on it at
Yeah.
our next RTM meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, so if we vote it down, they can come back with a modified proposal.
Right.
And with their certification in the hands that, here's your commercial permit. So I think for me, it's totally clear. If you agree to the lease, you're agreeing that somebody in town can run a business without a commercial permit. That's what you're doing. If you vote this down, you're basically saying, no, everybody who wants to run a business in town, even if the landlord is the town itself, needs a permit to do business. For me, this is black and white.
I'm not a lawyer, but I don't understand how operating a business without a permit to operate a commercial business is not already doing that. I'm not sure that the lease, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not sure how a lease that's contingent upon a special permit changes what in effect is happening, which is a commercial enterprise is operating without a special permit.
May I ask a
I think that's
procedural
important.
question?
Wait, I just want to.
Erica,
that's
let
really
Priscilla.
important. Okay, go ahead. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to ask a procedural question. So if it turns out we vote no on the stable, we turn it down, does that say to them across the board we don't agree with it? Or they can in fact come back to us with a different proposal?
It says that they can come back, and if the RTM does, which I don't know that it will, vote it down, there should be a reason of why it was voted down, so that reason can be, I'm looking for the right word, but can be satisfied and addressed to bring it back. But what I was talking about before is, again, there's one thing what the RTM does, all right? There's another part of this, and I think it's only on the stable that it's going to be raised, is what happens if the current tenant, the commercial, has issues with how that lease is currently written, all right? And that's what, that was my other answer is if they have material, will come back to us anyway.
Correct.
Can I ask Warner to just clarify the point that he just made, just in terms of if it's a lease that's contingent upon getting this permit, then doesn't the lease not actually go into effect until they get the permit?
That was my question I asked, and the answer I got is, or at least that the way I perceived it is, they can continue. They are currently running a business without a permit, and if the lease is being signed, they will continue running their business without a permit until the town will or will not receive the special permit for them, and that could happen, I don't know, in a week or never.
But if it never happens, then doesn't the lease that we are voting on never go into play?
That's a really important point I want to understand.
So
that's
critical.
I didn't follow it either. I mean, like if it's contingent, it's contingent, right? The lease never goes into effect then.
That was my initial understanding, and then Amy, you corrected me on this one.
Is it
because a contingent means you cannot run a business without a permit, and if the lease is contingent that there's a permit, I would support it. But if they can continue running their business without a permit, and we don't have a clue when the permit will be issued and if it will be issued, and they can continue running their business, it's Amy, that's what you clarified for me, then I think, I cannot agree to the lease.
Right. So I think
are we assuming that the selectmen have done all of this without consulting our town council?
No, town council was involved.
Yes, so, I mean, we're discussing legal issues, but we have a town council who advises the selectmen.
Yeah, but nobody can answer that question. So in doubt, right? I have to vote against.
I think if I can maybe respond, I think I can clarify between what what Greg's saying and what Werner's saying, which is the fact of the matter is that they are operating there. Now this is my own personal opinion. My personal opinion is our approving this lease gives a vote of says that we're okay with the fact that they're operating without a special permit. It says to me that we as an RTM are saying to them, we're okay with the lease. We don't care that you're operating without a special permit. They are going to from all that I've seen on site, they have been operating and will continue to operate without a special permit. And yes, the lease will be null and void if they don't get a special permit because it's contingent on the special permit. But they're operating anyway without one. And I personally can't vote in favor of a lease that says to them, I'm okay with what you're doing.
Amy,
That's really where I'm coming from.
Thank you for that, Amy. Amy, Jack, the Public Works Committee wishes to break off and deliberate on this further. Very much appreciate colleagues in Planning and Zoning and F&B joining us this evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
Amy, this is Sarah.
Wait, before we have any more conversations, F&B, do you want to break off as well or continue as a group?
I hate to sound, anybody from F&B who wants to break off can, so I can effectively ask for a motion to adjourn since we're not going to be able to vote tonight. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
I see Bill, I see Beth as the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Fine.
And just to be clear, that was only for F&B. PZ&H, we're still together.
So because we're not voting, we have no place to go. I did want to add one other thing. As being a parent of a former postie, please remember that there's a Memorial Day thing going on at Tilly Pond, and it's important to support Post 53. So, and it's a great time once you go there. Sorry for that public announcement.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you all.
Bye.
So, so for PZ&H, we are, according to our agenda, as prepared to vote tonight. It is, if you want to make a motion, we can. I guess the question is, I'd like to get opinions from people whether or not you would like to vote or whether or not you'd like to continue.
Can I ask one quick question before we vote? And I may have missed it. I apologize. Was there any discussion about the arsenic remediation on the residential leases?
There is no, only to the extent that we acknowledge that the leases do have that representation, that they acknowledge that there's arsenic. That representation is not in the lease that was extended that we're not voting on tonight because that wasn't part of it.
So we don't know if it's in there because arsenic can exist anywhere, or is this a reason why the price was dropped from $100 million to $85 million?
I mean, that's not really part of the lease discussion, but I'm sure the fact that the town has to do the environmental remediation is part of the reason the price was dropped.
Okay.
Amy, can I ask a follow-up?
Of course.
I'm still trying to get clarity on it, but so if we vote it down, the people who are operating, are they going to stop operating because we voted this down?
The RTM has to vote it down.
If the RTM votes it down, sorry, if the RTM votes it down.
I don't know, because again, the Board of Selectmen is the only one that can tell them that they have to leave.
Right, so that's what I kind of feel like. I don't necessarily agree with you that this is a decision point on whether they get to operate or not. I actually think it's got nothing to do with that.
Oh, no, I think you're right. We don't have control over whether they operate. The only one who has control over that is the Board of Selectmen.
Right, so them continuing to operate shouldn't be part of the decision point, right?
I guess what I'm saying is that I am not prepared to approve a lease. First, this is my personal opinion. I am not prepared to approve a lease, even if it says it's contingent on a special permit being issued, because I feel that us approving it is saying to them that we're okay with them operating a business on this town property without a permit. I also, candidly, and we didn't really get into this. I also have other problems with the barn operating on public property and the fact that that minimizes the amount that the public can actually use the property, because horses and people are not, especially horses of this caliber that this particular barn is running, are not conducive to being around, young children and dogs and everything else. But that's, we didn't really get into that whole side of the conversation. That's a personal opinion I have as well.
But the lease could be canceled on 90 days notice. If there was an operating plan in place where public was going to be admitted, that's going to be up to a future committee to decide.
Yeah. Correct.
This is Sarah. As a new person on the RTM, I guess, like, what are we trying to accomplish this evening? Do we go in front of the RTM and say, as the PZ&H committee, we voted yes or no for this, and then you go in front of the whole board, and then the whole RTM votes yes or no, or are we going as a recommendation as a group?
Yeah, just like we've done with other matters that we've reported on. So maybe I should have started with that. What rules has assigned this committee primary. So we will be introducing the resolution. I will be stating for the record what our vote was and, the rationale for the vote. And then that report will be given to the RTM, and the RTM will then they'll hear from Public Works, and they'll hear from Finance and Budget, and then the full RTM will vote. So, how we vote here.
So if we voted no, the RTM can vote yes and override it, basically.
Of course.
Yeah. But in a way, a no vote, which I'm leaning toward, could just basically put on record the objection to the points that you made,
right?
Which I agree are valid.
And I also want to be clear.
It doesn't necessarily reflect my feelings about, which I'm not sure about how I feel about, because you brought up some good points about the horses being there. I don't necessarily have an objection to having horses on the property per se, but the points that you're making in terms of operating without a permit to me are significant.
Right. And you can also vote, by the way, we're voting whether or not this is within this committee that we think that this is right. Again, remember, we're the Planning, Zoning, and Housing Committee. So we're talking about it from the perspective of planning and zoning. I will say that you can vote one way here and a different way at the RTM. You have every right to do that because you're going to be asked to vote again. And I will say that I'm aware of, for example, with the Great Island purchase, there were people in this committee that felt that it complied with the town plan. It was appropriate for the town, but they actually didn't, they didn't think that we should do the purchase. Maybe it was more of a financial reason, and they voted no at the RTM level. So I only say that not to call anyone out, but to say, your vote, you have to be thinking about it right now as, and it was helpful to have that whole meeting with everybody, but that's why I wanted to make sure we talked as just us, because Public Works is now looking at it just from a Public Works standpoint. We should be looking at it just from planning.
Thank you for making that distinction. That's important also. Thank you.
So our report could be, whether we do or do not think that it's appropriate from that perspective. And then we could still vote differently when we vote as RTM members as a whole.
Can I ask a quick question, Amy? This is just an assumption that I want to clarify, being new-ish, but with like the Blythe committee, when we voted yes, but made like the recommendation for the committee to consider like points X, Y, and Z. I'm assuming because that's within committees and not a report we're doing to our fellow RTM members, that's kind of a different lane and a different way to show that we have concerns and things that we'd like to be considerations moving forward, because like the process for that committee to deal with that is incredibly different than us. I don't know, kind of bringing our distillation of everything to the RTM. Because I was kind of wondering, like, okay, however the vote shakes out, if we say like, and here's some strong considerations we have, that kind of nullifies the point of view reporting, I guess. But I just, since that was, it seemed to be a very effective way to communicate our concerns without voting against anything with that example. I just wanted to clarify without hopefully going off on a tangent.
No. So yeah, the report will definitely include, the rationale behind our vote. And frankly, there's, if there is a vote that is not unanimous, I fully anticipate presenting both sides.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I think that it's, it will be, this is the vote of our committee, and this is why. There was, and you've heard that from other reports. I'm trying to think of somebody did that recently, where they said, here's why we're in favor of it. But, by the way, here are a few, there were some strong minority voices, that were against it. And here's why they voted the way that they did.
Okay.
So that's certainly something that will be brought before the full RTM.
Okay. Thanks.
We ready to vote?
How do people feel? I mean, I don't really want to have to call another meeting next week unless we think something's going to happen between now and then, or if we want to, we are just barely at a quorum with the number of people we have here. But
yeah, Amy, this is Kirk. I just want to say the cart before the horse was awesome.
And accurate.
That just made my day, by the way. I just absolutely loved it. And I'm ready to vote. And I'm kind of agreeing with you that it's hard to really vote on this yes under the circumstances, because we don't have a lease. Voting on the lease before we have a real business. It's hard for me, so I'm ready to vote as well. So
all right, so if we're all ready, I'm gonna go through, because like I said, we do have to have 6 separate votes. All right, so can I have a motion to approve the 24 Great Island lease? That's the residential lease at a rate of $4,800. Erica moves. Sarah seconds. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that one's unanimous. Can I have a motion to approve the 40 Great Island lease? That's the residential lease at a rent of $7,500. Priscilla moves, Erica seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Any abstentions? All right, so that one passes unanimously. Sorry, I'm trying to find a pen. 46A Great Island, that's one of the stable apartments. Can I have a motion to approve? Erica moves. Greg seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? Any abstentions? All right. 46B Great Island, that's the second stable apartment. Erica moves. Mary seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that one's unanimous. 49 Great Island, that's the residential apartment at a rent of $5,500. Erica moves.
Might as well.
May as
I'm
well.
on a roll.
Priscilla seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Any abstentions? All right, that one's unanimous. I will take a motion to approve the commercial stable lease.
I approve it.
Sarah moves. Greg seconds. All in favor? Greg in favor?
Sarah.
Sarah in favor? Anyone else in favor of approving the commercial stable lease? All right, objections? Me.
Aye. Kirk.
So I've got myself, Mike, Erica, Mary, Priscilla, and Kirk. All right, so we did not approve.
And who's 20365? Is that Susan? Did you get a chance to vote, Susan?
Oh, sorry.
I'm going to ask her to unmute.
And Betty also, I don't think Betty voted.
I'm asking them to unmute. I'm not sure who. I thought it was Susan, but you're thinking it's someone else.
No, there's somebody, the Betty Keller is on here too.
Oh,
Yeah.
and now there you go. You didn't get a chance to vote. Hello, 203-655 on the phone.
Susan?
Yeah, I voted. Susan.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
you were muted. So we didn't hear your vote, but now we do.
You got it? All right.
So Susan, are
was
you
your
in?
vote? What was
Yes.
what was your
Yes.
vote?
Yes.
Yes, for this stable lease. Okay.
Mhm.
All right, and then Betty?
Well, let me get Betty I'll ask her to unmute.
Against.
Against. Okay. Thanks, Betty. Sorry. Thanks, guys, for catching me. I would have noticed it when I counted them up.
And you
All
did
right.
get Sarah's vote, correct?
I got
She's
Sarah's
muted
vote
in.
of the yes.
Okay.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 against, 6 against, 3 in favor. What I'm going to plan to do, guys, because this was a close vote and I know people had a lot of thoughts on it, is I am going to, rather than just make the report, which I've sort of done in the past, I'm going to send around my proposed report. And if you have any, thoughts on something that you want to make sure is included or you think doesn't accurately reflect the conversations that we had tonight, I would definitely like the feedback. Having said that, please make sure that you respond to me only and not to the whole group, because if we start having a conversation on email, that's another meeting, but you can give me comments on the draft just to me directly. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Everyone feel okay with where we are?
Yes.
All
Good
right.
meeting.
Thank you.
Hold on, Amy.
Thanks.
Meeting.
And,
Yeah,
Great weekend.
very much enjoyed it.
thanks. And we'll get minutes out and vote it on at our next meeting. So thank you all for your time today.
Thank you,
And,
everybody. It was
oh, wait,
fun.
I need a motion to adjourn. Don't all.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Got you.
Eric, Mary moves, Erica seconds. All in
right.
favor.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.